I'm very glad because I see that the sort of solution I try to propose to solve a bytes-related argument is very much the same you are using here. So this gives me the feeling that I'm on the right track. But I have a little objection. Okay, so the move to try to block the argument is saying, well, when we say that in 1932, God knows that in the future almost blah, blah, is true. Actually, this is like a shorthand for in 1932, God in the eternal present knows that Paul knows, and so it doesn't follow that in 1932 God knows that Paul knows, right? Okay, so the idea is like trying to block the argument saying that you cannot attribute this sort of temporal relationships to God, right? So God knows, but not God knows from the eternal present. Okay, my question is whether God knows in the eternal present, right? In the eternal present, A entails that it is true A. And this is very reasonable because knowing seems to entail truth, right? So now, when you arrive to this, of course, it is true in the eternal present, but we are no longer like attributing any sort of temporal relation to God, right? So does this entail that it is also true? Is A true in 1932? So this is my question. So
yeah.
It seems that one of these should fail.
And no, it's yeah. But error comes right here. Error comes right here. So let's spell it out a little more. Now it's right that from this we get in 2095 Paul knows. What is not right is that we add on to this in the eternal present. That's not right. We stop right here.
Right, okay. In 2095 Paul knows.
Well, we don't have up here in the eternal present.
When is that true? My question is, when is that true? Because if God knows a proposition, that proposition is true.
This proposition is true
in the eternal present.
But here's what we're not saying. We're saying the future, this event will obtain at this temporal location.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ordinarily, by saying that this is true, we would also be entitled to say it is now the case that almost, that but these are not equivalent. They're not equivalent. And once we introduce the doctrine of eternity, from the truth of this, we can't get this. That's why
I have some misgivings about the notion of ET simultaneity. Because in your paper of 1981, you said that it is not a transitive relation, and we have an example coming from the special relativity, where there is also simultaneity. It depends on the observer, and so there can be two events that are simultaneous for an observer, and one of them simultaneous for another observer, but not the other one. So But there is a crucial difference between your proposal and the special relativity affair, I think. For special relativity, it is not only that there is no cases of absolute simultaneity, but that that notion is incoherent. The notion of simultaneity is relative, always. There is no privileged observer. But in this case, my doubts are whether the God's level and the temporal level are ontologically on a par. We can say from the point of view of God, standpoint of God is like this, from our standpoint is like that. Because for most theological traditions, if there is a standpoint of God, this is a standpoint, and all other points of view are relative, subjective, not the foundations, the standpoints. So this is a preliminary remark.
Could I deal with the preliminary remark?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
So the difficulty arises, in the way of thinking about it, the difficulty arises because not taking in the claim of classical theism that time and eternity are both equally real. Neither reduces to the other, and there is no third thing to which they both reduce. Now there are two ways of showing what difference this makes. A way with a story and a way with the logic of the doctrine. So I'm going to start with the story first, see if we can skip the logic. Okay. So there's a man named Erwin Abbott, an Englishman who's famous for exactly one thing, a book named Flatland. He was a theologian, and he got tired of having trouble explaining these classical attributes of God, so he wrote a story to help you have the idea. And his insight was, he thought, when you think yourself up the ladder of being to think about God, you'll have a hard time thinking up. Think down the ladder of being to something metaphysically smaller than yourself. And imagine how that smaller creature would try to understand you. Now you have an idea. So his story is a story about a two-dimensional world called Flatland. And it looks something like this. I can't draw something like that. This is Flatland. And Flatland has an absolute middle point. That's the absolute middle point. It's the absolute here. And in this world there are two-dimensional sentient creatures, and only one of them occupies here at a time. When one of them is here, the space is completely full, and there's no room for anybody else. That's the way it works. And around here, there are other sentient beings, like this. There they are, lots of them. And suppose they're in their bedrooms behind closed doors. See, there they are. Okay? Okay, and suppose that right here we have one of these sentient creatures, and his name is Max. Now suppose we say to Max, "Hi, hola," and he says, "Who are you? Where are you?" And we will say to Max, "I'm here." Max will say, "No, no you're not. I'm here. And if I'm here, you're not here." The logic is very clear. You say, "Well, actually, Max, in your world you're here, and in my world we're both here." "Ah," says Max, "you want to reject logic, and you want to relativize metaphysics to observers, and thereby render all our thought nonsensical." No, that's not it. They say, "Okay, Max, that's not it. It's like this, see, everything in your whole world is here to me." And now Max will say, "Worse and worse. Who can understand you? Your claims are completely incoherent, unintelligible." Max says, "It's very obvious. Those guys are there, they are not here. I am here. That's how it works. And we'll say, okay, look, Max, our here is bigger than your here. We are metaphysically bigger than you. Your entire world fits into our here. And then, you know, in the story of Flatland, when the three-dimensional speaker gets that far, Max rushes at him to try to kill him because you've got to wipe out any claim as nutty as that. Okay, that's the idea for the doctrine of eternity. Two modes of existence equally real. Nothing about the higher dimension takes away the lower dimension with its rules and logic. But the higher dimension is such that all of time is included in its now. So you can think of it this way. There's the timeline. And here is eternity. Let red be the color of the present. Then we'll, I mean, the pictures are obviously childish, but they're helpful. Here's the temporal now, a kind of cut in the continuum. And we have now the moving dot picture of time. The red scoots along the line, might say. But here's what we have in eternity. Now the thing to notice is that this is one indissoluble now. So wherever this red dot is, when it's related to this, the this to which it's related is one and the same. Interestingly now, if we turn the thing the other way around and ask, from what is up here, where is red down here? And the answer is this. Because everything up here, which is one unbroken, indivisible present, because everything here has a simultaneity relation with what is here. What is here, then wherever something here is actual, it's simultaneous with this. And that's why from the point of view of this, from the standpoint, from the metaphysical place of this, everything here is present, see? But that it is so doesn't make it so for us. So because this whole world is here for us, it does not follow that these, locked in their bedrooms, are here for Max. They aren't. They are not here for Max. And similarly, this is not here for us in the present, and the future is not here either, not now. That's how it works. So that's for the preliminary consideration. There is no one standpoint to which both these things can be reduced, not even the standpoint of God.
As for William Haskell P proposition, I agree with you that it doesn't seem to be coherent or possible, the position that it is in our hand to change God's belief that He holds in His eternal presence. Well, I don't send the page because it's different from here. After Plantinga's argument and Haskell's objection, it's not true that for an eternal God, all contingency has gone out of contingencies in time. God is related to contingent things as they are present, but nothing about this relation renders the contingent things past or non-contingent with respect to God. Well, I had a question but I think this question is answered later on, that this doesn't mean that God can change our past. That's it?
On the contrary, it makes it impossible for God to change the past.
Mm-hmm.
But God can act on things in time that are past with respect to you. Mm-hmm. So look at it this way. That's the present now. and here is time yesterday. Okay? Now, all of this is simultaneous with this, but also with this. God can't change this, but what happens here is dependent on God's action. So think about it this way. Suppose that someone comes rushing into this room and tells you that the ship on which your mother was having a marvelous cruise in the Mediterranean went down yesterday, and everybody on board went into the sea, but we don't yet know if your mother was among those few people rescued when the ship went down. Okay, now here's the question. That happened yesterday. Yesterday, your mother went into the sea. Now, does it make sense to pray to God that she be among the rescued? And the answer is sure. Sure. You can pray for what happened yesterday. You can pray for Socrates at his trial in Athens. Because your prayer here is simultaneous with this. This is simultaneous with everything. So it makes sense to pray for the past, but not to pray that the past be changed. So suppose you know for a certain fact that your mother died yesterday. Then it does not make sense to pray that she was rescued, because the past can't be changed. That is, if you pray now that your mother be rescued, and you know that she was drowned, then you're saying to God, I know you said no, but I would like you to say yes instead. And that makes no sense.
Okay.
But if you don't know, then it makes sense to pray, because as God is taking into account what to do here, your prayer will be among the things that God takes into account.
So, and if someone else knows it?
Does it make sense for them to pray?
No, I mean, if, for example, Eduardo knows that she's dead, but I don't, it does make sense for me to pray,
Yeah,
even if he knows.
yeah.
That will be praying to God for changing something.
No, you will simply be praying when you don't know what God already decided. See, think about it this way. The point of the prayer is not to change God's mind. It's to give God one more thing to take into account in his willing of what to do. If you already know what he willed to do, and it's the opposite of what you wanted to ask, there is no point in praying. See, if you suppose I have a teenage son, and he wants to know if he can have the car tonight, but the car is totally crashed and undrivable, then there's no point in his saying to me, please, can I have the car tonight? And this is wasting my time and his. There's no point, see? But if, in fact, he doesn't know anything about whether the car is okay or not, then it's okay for him to ask. At that point, he'll find out, no, you can't have the car, it's crashed. See, as long as he doesn't know, it makes sense to ask. It just makes no sense to ask if you already know. So that's the part about the past.
God can exercise causal influence in the same manner at any time. The worry is that if there is no difference between causing something in the past and causing something in the present and in our present and causing something in our future, so the past, present and future are in the same ontological boat. You say, well, the past is fixed, but even so it is contingent, but it could have been different. We could have done something different yesterday from what we did. So what I did yesterday, going to the cinema for instance, is contingent. Not only was contingent, is contingent, because I could have done it different, but it's fixed. Now, the future is also contingent in the same sense. My point is that whether it is not also fixed in the same sense. You say, no, it's not fixed. I don't see how it can be not fixed if God if God can exercise causal influence in the same manner at any time. So I think the future and the past both are contingent, but both are fixed. And if both are fixed, we really have no option or no choice or to do something different in the future, only in the Pickwickian sense in which we can change the past or something like that.
You're conflating the two worlds. So if you look here, see, it is the case that Max's whole world is here for me. All these people are here with respect to me. Now Max can say, look, you're ruining the logic of the world. If everything is here, then Max will say, look, there's there and over there, and these are not the same. But if everything's here, there's no there and no over there, or no north, no south. And what I want to say is, no, Max, in your world, you're here, and here is only right there. That's the only thing that's here. So it's just really true that for you there's over there and there. They're not the same. Anything which is there isn't here. Anything which is here isn't over there. That's really the way it is. You're still all here for me. And the fact that you're all here for me doesn't change the fact that your here is so little, it accommodates only one at a time. Okay, in the same way, God can exercise causal influence at any point along here, because from his metaphysically greater position, everything here is red. Everything here is now with respect to him. But it is not the case that everything here is now with respect to us. These are two distinct modes of duration, and the temporal mode retains its logic, its laws, even though these are temporal laws and they do not apply to an eternal God. So for us, this has happened, this has not yet happened. It doesn't work that, and only this is red. It doesn't work that way for God. And the flatland example, which Erwin Abbott created, helps us really see this point by thinking our way down the ladder. I don't have to go anywhere to get to Max's over there. Max has got to walk all this way to get to over there. That's Max. This is me.
Whatever happens in time happens at least because of God's knowledge of it. Again, William Haskell, your move is to try to show how God can act in time in spite of being eternal. But my question is, I have the impression that God knows things because the things are real in his presence, but things are real in his presence because he has also arranged things for them to happen a long time. So it seems that that there is a slippery slope towards God being the only real causal agent.
Well, we don't see the slippery slope part, but see, maybe I can just show a part about Hasker, and then you can help me see how your worry is different. Hasker is thinking of the situation like this. Do you remember the old film that used to go through the projector, one little frame of film at a time, and you're teaching your students you have to make sure the film goes through the projector just right. The projector shines a light, and then there's one piece of the film. Okay, Hasker is thinking of a film like that, and he's thinking God has that whole film tacked up on his wall. So everything is already there, God can't do anything about it. But that's actually a view of the matter incompatible with the doctrine of eternity. Because God doesn't see everything in time in advance or after the fact. All of these things are temporal notions. God is connected to things in time as those things are present. So as I look at you now, I see you smile, but my smiling, your smiling doesn't what? My seeing your smiling doesn't in any way causally fix your smiling or render it impossible for you not to have smile or something. What happens right here, I know because of its being there, but its being there is a consequence of what went right before. You smile because of the way the conversation went before. But this before time is open to God, and the before time of that is open to God. It's all open to God at once. And one and the same eternal present, think of it this way. What does God will? Well, in the eternal present, let's do it this way. And so on. One act of will that has, you might say, octopus tentacles at every point in time. See? So what happens here, God knows because it happens, but it happens because God knows what He willed to have happen at T1 and T2. So what happens here is dependent on God's knowledge. Then it happens, and God knows it because it happened. It's that logical order. But there is a temporal order too. What happens in time at time 3 is a function of what happens in time at time 2, and God is affecting time 2. So Hasker's picture of God all of a sudden at once seeing the whole film of time finished, that's just a confused picture. Because then on that picture, there's no simultaneity between eternity and time. See?
If God lives in an eternal present and He is et simultaneous with everything we do, how can you explain? I would like to talk to you, to know something, your opinion, more about your opinion about this problem. How is He et simultaneous with bad acts, bad choices from us? Because you say at the end of the paper, you wrote that His consequent will is in harmony with our choices, our acts. But in a sense, His consequent will is in harmony with our bad acts. In another sense, He is, we could say, we read in the Gospel of John, of St. John, He is frustrated by our bad acts or bad choices.
Suppose I look at you,
Yes.
and I discern in you malice toward your colleague here. So I see the malice. Now your malice is simultaneous with me. Okay, what's the problem?
The problem is to be in harmony with evil. How do you explain
I
the
see.
you know?
Oh, I see.
Because
This is now not a question about eternity, it's a question about the problem of evil.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So think about it this way. I am sitting at the dinner table with my family, and my 2-year-old grandson is sitting there. He's eating pizza, his favorite food, and he is foul in temper, foul, very like this. He takes his pizza, he throws it on the floor, turns to his sister and hits her. And his poor mother says to him, Johnny, if you throw your pizza on the floor one more time, if you hit your sister one more time, dinner is over for you. You will eat nothing, and you will go to your room and be by yourself. He looks at his mother, he picks up his pizza, he throws it on the floor and hits his sister. Then his mother picks him up, screaming child, removes him from the table, takes him screaming to his room, shuts the door, and lets him scream there. Now, we have an explanation of antecedent and consequent will. What did she want? To have a nice dinner with her family. What did she will in her consequent will? That the 2-year-old screamed by himself, hungry in his room. Okay, so what's the point here? The point is that in his antecedent will, God wills that everything be good, everything be in harmony with him.
Yeah.
Given what we do, his consequent will is to allow evil and suffering. Not because that's what he likes, but because, in the same way as with the child, allowing it is better than the alternatives. It's not good, but it's better than the alternatives. I mean, it's better to let the child do the bad thing and remove him screaming from his room than it is, for example, better than taking him to the neurosurgeon, having the neurosurgeon implant something in his brain, so that he always just says, yes, mama, no, mama, sure, mama. No.
I'm also interested in the arguments of compatibilist, incompatibilist, and I am always worried about the ambiguity of necessary, fixed, determined, and so I'm very happy that you have made this point about contingency, that the fixity of the past does not rule out contingency. But I'm not sure, given this ambiguity, I'm not sure whether your criticism of Hasker really applies to him, because I'm not sure whether he's saying that the past is not contingent, or I'm sure he's not saying that God can change the past. He's saying that things could have been otherwise, but he's not saying that God can change the past. So I'm not. I would say that Haskell might reply to you that I wasn't saying, for example, that contingency is ruled out. I was just saying that the past is fixed in a different sense. Or I'm not saying.
Look at the quotation that ends in footnote 11. You see, Hasker says, when an eternal God looks at time, God distinguishes necessities and contingencies in time. He recognizes that there are these things in time, but there's no contingency left in time in the form in which these things reach his gaze. So something about God's eternal gaze renders all these things without contingency.
In the same sense as God distinguishes necessities and contingencies? Is it the same?
I think the conclusion is this: for Haskell, God looks at all of time as a temporal being would look at the temporal past. But that's the point of my example about smiling. See, when I see you smiling, I can influence your smiling. I can't influence your smiling yesterday. That's the point.
We have ET simultaneity, and it is not transitive. So the question is very basic. How do you account for, well, the healthcare concern was prophecy. So how do you make an account of prophecy and Christ's knowledge of future contingents? Since once one participates in a way in God's eternal knowledge, it becomes tense. So
It's a beautiful, beautiful question. It's a beautiful question. Here's the question. Once we have a prophecy, then the object known is known by someone in time. And then we have exactly the situation we have in planning his argument if God's knowledge were in time. Okay. So doesn't that take away human free will? Now the first thing to notice is that most prophecies have a funny form. So look at the prophecies in Daniel, and this is what they say. At some time in the future, time unspecified, somebody in the north, person unspecified, north unspecified, will do a certain action, fighting, nature of action unspecified, with somebody, person unspecified, who lives in the south, location unspecified. Now, when we've got a prophecy like that, it doesn't determine anybody to do anything because it leaves so much unspecified, see? So most prophecies are of this form, and you might say they're of this form just exactly so as not to incur the problem of ruling out somebody's free will. But they're not all like that. There is at least one where everything is specified. And that's described in the book of Acts. So in the book of Acts, here's the situation. Paul has been converted on the road to Damascus, but the process of conversion has left him blind, and he's sitting blind in somebody's house. God comes to Ananias, a Christian, and God says to Ananias, I want you to go to street what's-it at about this time tomorrow and put your hand on Paul's eyes and restore his sight. I told Paul yesterday that you would be coming at about that time to do this. So now we have a report of a prophecy where the geographical location is fixed, the time is fixed, and the actors are fixed. So here's a really interesting thing about this prophecy and this story. When God tells this to Ananias, what Ananias says to God is, I don't want to. I'm not going to go. And then God talks him into it. Ananias says, Paul's a bad man, I don't want to help him. God says, no, he's become converted, don't worry about it. And Ananias says, well, in that case, I'd love to go. So the thing to notice here is that we have a story which explains to Ananias that there's only one option for action open to him. He does not have two alternatives, only one. And yet, as the story explains, when Ananias goes, he goes on his own free will. And now, what this story calls in question is whether you need alternative possibilities for freedom of action. See?
it's a Frankfurt case.
Oh, it's a Frankfurt case. Yeah, it's a Frankfurt case. That's exactly right. So what we want to say about prophecy is, if prophecy is very determined, it will limit options to one. But we need further information before we conclude from this that free will is taken away. Free will is taken away if something acts on the will with efficient causation. It's not taken away by the mere fact that options are limited to one.
Assuming the doctrine of Thomas Aquinas so as to make it concrete, what would, in your opinion, be the explanation of God's knowledge of any given point in time? Because according to Aquinas, it is either the case that either things are the cause of my science or my science are cause of things. And if God is immutable and he cannot be altered by us, then the argument of presentiality needs to be clarified, because it seems, okay, so God is et simultaneous with all these points in time, but let's reduce everything to a now. In a now, a person simply gets influenced by something that reaches my eyes or my ears, so things cause in me the knowledge of those things. So even though for many matters we can exemplify God as looking, as the same way we look, it's problematic when we think about the cause of any given science, in this case the science of God. So
I'm missing a word. A science of what?
the science of God, sorry.
Oh, I see. The knowledge,
So-
the knowledge of God.
Yes, because
The knowledge which God has.
which knowledge of, yes, I'm sorry. And because in the Potentia he says that God moves a person's will. He does not only create things and keeps them in existence, but he also moves and applies my will to action. So in this way he's still the first cause and I'm the second cause. He does say that he moves things in accordance to their own nature. So the way that God moves my will is not the same way that he moves a rock or something else. But so the question is there a matter of presentiality, or we should focus on this theory about moving freely somebody else? Because if God is the first cause and he's causing everything, then he knows things because he causes them. And maybe the discussion is about if there is such a thing as a consistent way of conceiving a person moving another, an infinite person moving a finite one, and still be free will, and not so much a matter of time and before and after.
What I want to say as a general methodological principle is this. You bring to a historical figure, when you interpret him, you bring to a historical figure, as you must, as everyone must, a whole array of preconceptions and presuppositions which are the lens through which you read him. There's no alternative to this. But there is a natural corrective. If, when you're all done interpreting him, you come up with a result which on the face of it is implausible, then you want to backtrack and think about how you got to that point. Now, on this way of thinking about things, which is common in a certain domain of Thomistic scholarship, Aquinas comes out looking just like Calvin. He causes everything, and there really is nothing for which you have ultimate responsibility. When Aquinas comes out looking like Calvin, you want to pause and backtrack and start over again. So if we start over again with the issue of God's knowledge, then here's the thing to ask. When you take this claim, God's knowledge causes everything, God knows it because he causes it, just ask yourself the question, does God know himself? I mean, does he cause himself by knowing himself? And now you can see this makes no sense. This makes no sense. So you have to think, okay, when Aquinas says God's knowledge is the cause of things, what exactly is he talking about? God's knowledge is the cause of what God knows. Even if we limit this to things in time, and say God's knowledge is the cause of things in time that he knows, we will then have to say that God's knowledge is the cause of every evil act that occurs. This also makes no sense. So I would say if you look carefully at the text, what you will find is the cause in question is not an efficient cause, it's an exemplar cause or a formal cause. So what is at issue there is the way in which God's knowledge of things, not events or actions, but of things, is the cause of them insofar as he gives the things that exist their form in creating them. That's, I think, the right way to interpret that line. And as for the other line about God's action on the will, I think Aquinas' texts are clear. They are clear. Just take the line about God acts on things in accordance with their nature. Your nature is to have a will which is magister of itself. Okay. If God is causing your will to will what it wills, then you aren't in any sense magister of your own acts, and in fact for your evil acts we can attribute them ultimately to God. This also makes no sense. So another way to think about this is anything that there is participates in being. But what there is in you is a will that can be the ultimate cause of its own action. You can be the ultimate cause of your action. And you can be that because God causes in you and preserves in you the being that is operative in the acts you do. When Aquinas discusses grace, he says, even God does not act on the will with efficient causation. God's action on the will in the bestowal of grace is an act of formal causation. And he explains very clearly what he means. He says that when something acts on something else with efficient causation, that causal actor first removes a form in the thing that was there, and then adds a new form. This is what God does not do to the will. What God does to the will is put in a form where there was no form already. And there was no form already because the will had ceased willing what it willed before. The exercitium of the will is always in the control of the will for Aquinas. You can turn your will off, you can cease willing, and when you have ceased willing the rejection of something, then God can introduce a form. So in this way, by a distinction of the kinds of causation, you can see how these sentences of Aquinas are true, but he doesn't come out looking like Calvin. Once we have him safely removed from Calvin, then these lines about eternity are unfounded.